Welcome back to RGR. This is another look at what's going to go on this week against the Raiders. And the Chiefs have a lot of factors. Matt Derrick's back with me. You heard him on Locked On Chiefs this week. How are you, Matt?
Doing well, Ryan. Doing well.
Now, this is one of those things that, as somebody who tries to stay, analyst hat, I could switch it off. And this is one that I enjoy watching more than most as a fan sometimes. I just don't see how this isn't going to be a break somebody's back like they have revenge on their minds kind of game. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I see it that way. And it has nothing to do with the Raiders because, you're always going to hear about Chiefs Raiders and the rivalry. And these guys, they don't care about the rivalry. They don't. But what the Chiefs care about is that the Raiders came into Arrowhead in week 5 and embarrassed them. They beat them deep. They stole some plays from the Chiefs playbook and how they beat them on the offensive side. The Chiefs scored 33, but they felt a little pushed around on when they had the ball. The Raiders had an effective strategy and it worked to a degree. But bottom line, I mean, the Chiefs feel a little insulted that they let the Raiders come in and beat them on their home field. Yeah. And they'd love nothing more than just to pay them that for that alone. They would love to go into an AFC West opponent and win in their building, their brand new fancy building. So there's a lot of motivating factors, and almost none of them have anything to do with the fact that Chiefs fans hate Raiders fans.
Yeah, well,
nobody cares about that.
It could bleed over eventually. You bring up a good point because I still feel like that first game, if it's not for the problems in the secondary on the Chiefs side, that game isn't anywhere near as close as it came out, and certainly is something that they can correct. Do you see this being something that is going to be a nail biter of any kind?
I mean, I guess I should expect that because of what happened in week 5, and everybody's talking up the Raiders and talking up Derrick Carr. But I don't see it. I mean, as I mentioned on the pod the other day, I mean, the Chiefs on any given Sunday against the Raiders should be a 5 to 7 point favorite wherever they're playing. And I think that's absolutely the case in this situation. And given all of the external factors and the motivation factors, I just don't think this is going to be a terribly close game. I mean, the Raiders are certainly capable of keeping it close. But if the Chiefs come out and play their A game, even if the Raiders play their A game, Chiefs A game is better.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why, I think we saw in week 5, the Raiders have to play close to perfect and the Chiefs can't. If the Chiefs play their B or C game, then the Raiders can win.
Yeah. Well, and it's definitely one of those things where the offense has a couple of tricks up its sleeve. It always has. Like, it just feels to me more like they're rolling those tricks out a little bit more methodically. We saw the Ferrari play last week, folks. I broke that down here on the channel. Go back and check that from Thursday. But is that something is that setting up opponents, specifically the Raiders and maybe the Bucks too, to see something that they can then play off of?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, that's what Andy Reid's a master at. I mean, he will call a play in week 2 with the entire intention that he just wants to show an opponent something that he's going to do an exact same play in week 9 and just show them a very different variation. I mean, it's a football season's a symphony.
Yeah.
To Andy Reid, and more so than I think other coaches. I mean, everybody does that. Everybody will try to show something on film. I mean, good grief. I mean, the fake punt that the Chiefs ran a few weeks ago was probably certainly just, we want to put this on film and show people it's in our bag, so don't come after our punter.
Right.
You got to watch it. But, Andy Reid, I mean, he will have 8 different variations of the same play. And just because you see the same look that you've seen before doesn't mean that's the same action coming your way. And that's what the Chiefs are really good at. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're certainly going to see them trying to build off some things that they did against the Raiders the first time around to try and just, fool them and throw them off a little bit. But you know what? I mean, we talk about Andy Reid after the bye, and I stick with it. 2 weeks to prepare for a game that he wants to win to get these guys back. I don't know how you stop Andy Reid in that situation.
Yeah, I don't think John Gruden does either. So more power to him. But then you rolled right into where I was going to go too. Like, it's not just the revenge game, getting caught up for being embarrassed earlier in the season. It is to get you back on a roll. And this starts off the whole run to the postseason, where they have to tighten things up. They have to get things more detailed and more refined so they can hit on all cylinders. one of those things that I still feel like almost in a mirror from last season that has to come is the pass rush. And we saw Frank have a slow start in 2019. We've seen him have a pretty slow start, although I think better overall in 2020. But he does feel like Frank Clark in particular is playing up his teammates, but he himself has a bit more to fire up on. Do you think it starts now, or is it a little bit further into the year?
I mean, this is exactly the time last year that Frank Clark really turned it on, and some of it was injury related, certainly, because he was playing hurt the first half of the season. Having this bye week, certainly, if there's anything that's affecting him and him and Chris Jones too, everybody defensively, if there's anything nagging injuries, I mean, this is a week to get everything extra rest, and you should be able to come back with renewed vigor. But yeah, I mean, we're still learning about Frank Clark, but you did see a little bit of a different guy last year. And maybe we'll find out, whether it was just simply was the injury, or if getting late in the season, getting in December, getting close to the postseason flips a switch that just, brings out an extra gear in this guy. And maybe we'll find out more about this in the second half. I mean, you're right. I mean, the entire Chiefs pass rush across the board had a quieter first half. I mean, they've been getting the pressures. They've been affecting quarterbacks. And we've talked about the fact they've faced a lot of quarterbacks who like to run. That makes things a little bit more difficult too. You're gonna face some immobile quarterbacks in the second half of the season. Yeah. And if they don't pile up the sacks in the next 7 games, then I think there's a problem to worry about going into the postseason. But this should absolutely be feast time for Frank Clark and Chris Jones.
And I'm glad that you bring them up too, because when you look at them as a pair, as what should be the catalyst of that pass rush, the fact that they play next to each other, I think sometimes is a little bit bothersome. Frank talks about moving around a little bit more as the year goes on. Is that one of the keys that when you don't have Okafor, when you have kind of a rotation at the other end spot, that you have to do?
I think you do, and also it's just the nature that if the Chiefs want to try and get pressure with 4, they can't do the same thing all the time. I mean, they've got to have some flexibility. And that's something that I think has been the problem, because the Chiefs have not really had a problem getting pressure when they've been bringing blitzes. The problem has been sometimes just getting the pressure when they only bring 4. And they would like to do that a lot. Yeah. And I thought you saw against Carolina. I mean, you saw Frank Clark standing up in the middle against alongside Chris Jones coming up. Not really a tackle position, maybe a middle linebacker. I mean, how you'd call that, but yeah, you have seen him moving around. I thought it was really interesting that, when talking about Chris Jones lining up outside and Frank Clark talking about the fact that they both like to play on the right side. And, and that's just not possible all the time. So, yeah, I mean, Clark being able to move back and forth, Jones being able to move back inside and outside, being able to move Clark around. And the numbers bared out a little bit because Clark talked about, having to drop back more this season. Yeah. And some of that is by design. I mean, some of it's, hey, it's the Chiefs wanting to show maybe a rush from one direction and dropping Clark back. Some of it's what teams do. I mean, they're like, hey, how are we going to mitigate Frank Clark? It's not necessarily by double teaming him. It's by, running patterns at him and forcing him to drop back. So you've seen teams doing a lot to try and scheme around Frank Clark and force him away from rushing the passer. That's one of the things you work on the bye week. And that's one of the things that you work on as a coaching staff, is figuring out how to counter that if teams are going to do that, how do you move Frank Clark around to ensure that he can go after the passer more and doesn't get put in those situations?
Yeah, especially we saw one, and I'm not sure if I got it on the channel yet. It's in the data bank there, but a cross field drop where he's covering the opposite flat. That just doesn't pay anybody. It doesn't pay off in any way, shape, or form. So is that back to the chalkboard, or is that, again, taking what the offense is giving you?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, you have to game plan around that. I mean, we saw teams do that a lot against Justin Houston their last few years in Kansas City, is that you did exactly that. I mean, you tried to find ways to force Justin Houston to drop back in coverage. Because he's good at it, but you know what? If you can set up situations where you've got a receiver or a tight end on Frank Clark, your offense is going to win that most of the time. Scheming around that, figuring out how to put Clark in the situations where he doesn't run into that as much is something that the coaching staff has got to figure out. And probably just even, play calling in general. I mean, some of it has been absolutely play calls where Clark is in the position where he is going to drop back. I don't know if that's necessarily the best for the Chiefs. Probably part of a byproduct of that is that the Chiefs are, playing a lot of nickel and dime coverages where they don't have linebackers on the field. Mm-hmm. And Frank Clark then has to almost, play an outside linebacker position. And that's where we have seen him line up quite a bit.
And that's going to be my last pivot point, because we saw the defense step up as they got towards the postseason. I expect to see that again. But part of that was improved play at certain positions. I think one thing that can really improve this defense overall is Willie Gay being on the field more. Am I overreaching, or is it finally gotten to the point at week 10 here, week 11, wherever we're at, that it should be that changing of the guard a little bit more to get the athleticism on the field for the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, the bye week was kind of the drawing line for me of when, Willie Gay really needs to be ready to step up and play more. If we're not seeing him more in the field in the second half of the season, then I think some of it is still going to be the Chiefs only feel comfortable with him in certain positions. And they're going to still continue to be, we're going to see him up against specific schemes and just playing specific spots. The challenge with getting Willie Gay on the field, to me, is that if the Chiefs are only going to play two linebackers on the field at any one time, then one of them is always going to be, it's going to be either Anthony Hitchens or Ben Neiman, because those are the guys that call the plays. And a rookie like Willie Gay is not ready to do that. He's not ready to step into the role of those two guys. So one of those two is always going to be on the field. And then it's, hey, do you need someone else? And a lot of times we even see the Chiefs increasingly go with one linebacker on the field. And if that's the case, it's not Willie Gay.
Right.
So that's where I think the biggest, challenge is figuring out for the Chiefs how to get Willie Gay more involved at multiple positions. Because if he's only going to continue to play one or two roles, then there's limited opportunities for him.
Yeah. And, let Dan be a safety like he should be. So we'll let that get back to what it's supposed to be. Thanks for all the time this week, Matt.
Absolutely, Ryan. Great talking to you.
Yep. Folks, we'll catch you next time tomorrow.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. These videos to see more, and subscribe to RGR Football.